Today, we're going to unravel a really fascinating economic puzzle out of Pakistan. Picture this. It's October 2025, and you've got the country's stock market hitting an incredible all-time high. But at the exact same time, there's a devastating cost of living crisis hitting people on the streets. So how can both of these things be true? Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's try and wrap our heads around this. On one hand, you have a situation that looks fantastic, especially to international investors. But for the average person in Pakistan, the reality was, well, it was much, much tougher. It really was a tale of two different economies happening in the same country at the very same time.
And this slide really puts that conflict right in front of you. On one side, the Pakistan Stock Exchange is just on fire, signaling huge confidence from investors. But on the other, you've got this gut-wrenching crisis where the price of essential food is just going through the roof.
So what is actually going on here? That's the big question we're going to unpack in this explainer. How can these two completely opposite economic stories both be true? Let's break it all down.
All right, let's start with the good news side of the coin. And this whole part of the story really begins with a crucial agreement with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. This was the spark that lit the fire in the financial markets.
First, a little bit of jargon we got to get through. The Staff Level Agreement, or SLA. The easiest way to think about this is like a big seal of approval from the IMF's technical experts. It's them saying, yep, this country's economic plan looks solid. It's basically the green light that unlocks the cash.
And things happened fast. As you can see here, negotiations started on October 1st. A week later, there was a positive statement, and by the 14th, just 2 weeks in, the deal was done. That kind of speed built some serious momentum.
And the result of all that quick work? A massive injection of funds. We're talking about $1.2 billion in financing for Pakistan. To the rest of the world, that number screams stability.
It wasn't just the cash that mattered. The words from the IMF were huge. They publicly came out and praised Pakistan's economic management. They were essentially telling the world, hey, these guys are on the right track. And that, right there, is what sent confidence soaring. So, with the IMF's blessing and all this money flowing in, what happens next? The stock market goes absolutely wild. Investors, feeling reassured and optimistic, poured money in, pushing the main index to this incredible record-breaking high. Okay, but while the traders and investors were popping champagne, a completely different and much grimmer story was unfolding for millions of people. A major crisis was hitting home. What happened was a massive, devastating climate shock, right in the country's agricultural heartland. These weren't just minor floods. They were severe enough to wipe out huge amounts of crops and just shatter the supply chains that get food from the farms to people's tables.
Now, to really grasp what this meant for regular people, we need to look at this thing called the Sensitive Price Index, or SPI. It's a really important indicator that tracks, week by week, how the price of basic necessities, things like flour, sugar, vegetables, is changing. And the sheer scale of this shock is just staggering. Look at this number. In just one single week, the cost of these essential items jumped by 5%. That isn't a slow rise. That's a sudden, painful price explosion.
This chart just lays it all out, doesn't it? Look at the weeks before. Tiny little changes, barely noticeable, and then, bam, that huge 5% spike. You can just imagine how violent and unexpected that felt for household budgets across the country.
So this puts the State Bank of Pakistan, the country's central bank, in an incredibly tough spot. You've got this wild party happening in the stock market, but at the same time, people are struggling to afford food. What on earth do you do?
Well, they were facing a classic economic crossroads. Option 1, lower interest rates. That makes it cheaper for businesses to borrow, hopefully stimulating the economy. But the big risk is that this new inflation spike spirals completely out of control. Option 2, keep interest rates high. That helps fight inflation and keeps the IMF happy, but it also slows down the economy. In the end, they made their choice. They decided to hold the line, keeping the policy rate high at 11%. And the message they sent was crystal clear. Stability comes first. They decided that fighting that immediate, painful inflation shock and keeping their promises to the IMF was more important than trying to give the economy a short-term boost. All right, so after all of that, where does this leave us? What's the real story here? The big takeaway from this whole paradox? Well, I think the core lesson is pretty clear. You can get all your ducks in a row with international finance, shore up your external accounts, and make investors happy. But if your domestic economy is this fragile, you're still critically vulnerable to shocks from within. So the analysis suggests the real path forward isn't just about the next big loan. It's about building resilience from the inside out. That means things like investing in better supply chains, protecting farmers from climate disasters, and making tough but necessary domestic reforms to build a stronger foundation. And all of this brings us to one final provocative thought that I want to leave you with. It really forces us to ask, what is financial stability truly worth if an economy isn't shockproof? Is it really stable at all? Thanks so much for joining this explainer.